and welcome to In Conversation. When we visit places such as the Nilgiris, we appreciate the natural beauty that we see around us, and many of us even love to click pictures. That is made possible because of the efforts of some people towards preserving and protecting the environment. One such person is Snehlata Nath, who has spent almost 3 decades of her life preserving the environment and the cultures of the indigenous people of the Nilgiris, yet bringing in technological innovation to support their livelihoods. Here's her story.
Snehlata Nath hails from Lucknow. Born to parents who were government officials in Lucknow Secretariat, she is the youngest of 6 siblings. While most of her siblings joined government service, Snehlata opted for a different course. Not inclined to join the government, she decided to take up social work. After doing her post-graduation in economics, she joined Development Alternatives, an NGO in Delhi, where she worked for the welfare of rural labour and women's empowerment. In 1994, she joined hands with 3 of her associates for a statewide survey of beekeeping in Tamil Nadu. That led to the establishment of Keystone Foundation in Kotagiri Hill Station of Nilgiris district of Tamil Nadu. The foundation works in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, spread across the 3 states of Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Karnataka. As founder-director of Keystone Foundation, Snehlata has dedicated her life to creating a harmonious balance between nature, humans and technology over the last 30 years. Her foundation has been building on the traditional knowledge of tribals to provide them livelihood support while preserving their indigenous cultures and biodiversity of the region. Snehlata excels in building micro-enterprises with tribal women. These micro-enterprises produce value-added goods from agricultural and forest produce. In 2018, the President of India conferred on her the Nari Shakti Puraskar in recognition of her contribution to empowerment of tribal women. Snehlata Nath continues to empower tribal communities through sustainable interventions and a holistic approach towards the people and the environment.
Welcome, Ms. Nath, to Doordarshan.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm absolutely great, and I hope you're doing well as well with the COVID pandemic on the wane now, thankfully. Now, let's start from the start. You spent several years in Delhi, where I am sitting, before deciding to travel well over 2,000 kilometers to go to the Nilgiris, where you are sitting right now. What made you undertake that journey?
I would say that it was just my interest to work in the field and directly with people. So in Delhi also we were in an NGO, and it is a very interesting NGO called Development Alternatives, and really enjoyed working there actually. But being in Delhi was not really the good feel of, you know, what development actually is. And when we are trying examples of sustainable, you know, options, or what is eco-development, this is something that we really wanted to test out in the field. So one of the reasons why we came all the way, you know, backpacking in this lovely mountains actually, yeah.
So you came to the Nilgiris, and then what were your initial observations and experiences that eventually led to the establishment of the Keystone Foundation?
I would say 2 things that really struck us, and one was that the land use was really changed. I mean, the plantations, tea and coffee plantations had over a period of time actually changed the ecology of the hills. And, you know, lack of biodiversity, loss of forests, those kind of things were very evident. And also the use of chemicals for, you know, these plantations was very high. So environmentally, it seemed like it looks very beautiful, but environmentally, it's not really very great. So that was one thing about the general environment. But when we went into the tribal communities in the remote forest areas, and then we realized that, you know, there's a lot out there. There's, you know, in the sense of traditional knowledge, there is livelihoods to be seen, and a lot of health and nutrition issues with the communities and things like that. So I think it's almost 30 years back that I'm telling you the story was very different then. And the communities were also quite shy, and they would run off, you know, when they saw us. So it took a long time to build that confidence and, you know, start working with these people. And yeah, so these were the observations which we thought, okay, let's give it a try, you know, let's try to work out things here. And if there can be really sustainable development models or eco development models, can we bring up something out here? So we kept a trial period of almost 2 to 3 years, just to see whether it will work out or what will happen with the people and the governments and everything, like how they will react. Um, Unfortunately, we got a very, very good response from everyone. And I think, the story of bees and honey is something that captured everybody's mind. And we started off like that because we wanted to use the bees as a kind of a livelihood and indicator of the environment, which could tell many stories, altogether. So yeah, that's how we started, and it was a tentative move, but then it has established the organization now, which has diversified and started doing a lot of activities.
When you say we, who all constituted that we? Who were the people that you brought along with you to set up the foundation?
Yeah, so actually we're three co-founders, and we're just three friends who started off working in that NGO in Delhi, and we met over there, and that's how we thought that, okay, this is the we. So, and there was, of course, in another project down south, there was one more person who joined us. His name is Leo. He was there with us, and for each and every part of the journey, the exploration, how will we work, what will we do, we were together, four of us. Yes.
So you said that you made a number of observations after reaching the Nilgiris. Then what were the focus areas that you began with?
I would say livelihoods was something very crucial. And with these communities, forest-based livelihoods, we try to look at the kind of collection they do from the forest, the kind of land use they have, and what could they grow and things like that. So both agriculture and forest-based livelihoods was something that was being addressed. That's as I mentioned, bees was something somehow very close to the communities because they are very good honey gatherers, both from the wild and also keeping them in bee boxes and rearing bees for honey. So that was something that started us off, but that linked to many things. It linked to forest conservation because of the flora. So the bees needed foraging plants and so on and so forth. It just became more and more diverse and complicated, I would say.
So tell us about the diversity that the foundation works with now. What were the different areas that you ventured into?
I think from livelihoods, the aspect that hit us most was the health and nutrition of the community members of this Adivasi people. So mainly the women, especially because they would often fall ill and we would see them very weak in the villages. So something that I always, kind of say that, we can't have communities, though they may earn money, but their health is so bad, so it doesn't make sense. So we had a lot of examples in which, blood counts were really low of women, and we thought we have to do something there. And while discussing with the elders of the community, they told us that they also had traditional agriculture in which there were a lot of millets and other, mixed crops, which they had given up, and the seeds were also not there in the village. So I think a revival of that became a major thing that the foundation took up, so that people had food and nutrition and health was in their own hands, and the traditional food was back in their palate. So I think that was a really interesting and exciting project, which now, of course, after so many years, millets is the in thing, and it's become very, very popular. So that was one thing that we diversified into. Now, after that, a lot of the work was related to conservation. So springs conservation, water conservation, related to indigenous species and the forest plants that they collect. How could those be sustainably harvested? So we had a lot of work related to that. These were the few things that I would say I would emphasize on. And after 2006, 2007-8, when the rules came out and the Forest Rights Act came into being, that was the time when a lot of the work got focused on the land rights of Adivasi people. So how could they claim their current lands? How could they claim the access to forests, and what could be done about habitat rights? So this is something, it continues, work on this is continuing. It's a big task, so it is still going on.
It is really a holistic approach then to the entire ecosystem in the rural and tribal areas. How did you bring in technologies into the lives of the indigenous communities that have been using their own traditional ways and means for their livelihoods?
I think one of the things that hadn't happened before was the organizing of these communities, into small groups and like women's groups and other things. And we always thought that, okay, as I mentioned, beekeeping was something that they took up, and they used to collect honey from the forest also. So value addition of honey and beeswax became one of the biggest things that we worked on in the beginning, in which it was quite a decentralized village level kind of approach where appropriate technology could be used to filter beeswax, to hygienically manage the honey, to package the honey and things like that. So technology was used at that level. But later this thing really diversified in a big way. So NTFPs of all kinds got value added at the village level. And now like for example, soap nut and shikakai, kadukai, a lot of other NTFPs, amla. This is something that, needed technology to work at the rural level. So we have these village centers in which the women were trained to work on these technologies and then earn a livelihood for themselves at a local level. So I would say that this was quite a good, way in which local livelihoods could be generated from local resources. So this is something that we worked on.
You said that it took time to build confidence among the tribals, after you came to the Nilgiris and thought of working with them. When you decided to help the local communities improve their quality of life while preserving the environment by bringing in innovative solutions, what was the kind of response that you got? Were they welcoming of this idea, or did you face any initial resistance?
No, in fact, no resistance. And I think maybe it was our very good fortune that we met very, very interesting people and a lot of village elders who really, with whom we had a lot of dialogue. So even in our team, we included people from the community. And they looked at it as a very kind of, let's say, inclusive kind of approach, in which we were not so much considered as outsiders, though we were outsiders. But, they looked at us as friends, and we always looked at it like a partnership. So we were bringing these technologies and ideas, whereas they had their own traditional knowledge and a lot of, resources that they knew about.
And it's notable that you kept those traditional knowledge and cultures intact. You're also going on to preserve them. Before we talk about that, since the foundation is working in several areas, is there any one particular story of impact, either enabled by technology or otherwise, that you can share with us?
I would share the, example of the Adimalai Producer Company, which we set up. And this was a kind of a, coming together of all the village women groups that were, set up, in which the tribal people were giving their produce to a local area. And from that area, it would be value added, and then it would be sold as products. So for example, amla was value added into, amla candy and dry amla and so on, pickle and squash and so on. So I think what we managed to do is look at the success, I would say, was in bringing together all these units and forming this producer company, which is, I would say, very few Adivasi people have producer companies, and we have almost 2,000 families as members of that in it today. So they are the shareholders, and they earn the profits from, all these sale of their own produce and their value-added products. So I think that has, had a long impact on their, livelihood and their well-being, because they are assured that they can sell their produce in, with better prices, and they are also, it's a transparent system in which they know that if profits are made, it will be shared with all the shareholders. So I think that was really a big impact, and it continues till to date, that effort, which tries to look at what we say, the triple bottom line. So can you have equity, environment and economy together?
You've trained the local communities and they've become entrepreneurs in their own right. But what is the entire scale and scope of the training sessions that the foundation offers, and how many all in all would have been trained by the foundation so far?
I think we work all across the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, so that covers parts in Kerala and Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So I would say roughly 3,500 villages, and it covers about 25,000, 30,000 families directly. So, and the scope of the work is not only related to enterprise. So we have a lot of other trainings which relate to how they will claim their rights, for example, legal literacy, for other things related to health and nutrition, especially focused on women and children. There's a lot of training on those aspects, on MHM, on things that we feel that they are being they don't have enough knowledge, let's say, and things that can be improved in their areas. So, including water and sanitation, we have a lot of, barefoot, let's say, expertise in the villages, where the training has helped communities build their knowledge, and they themselves monitor now quite a lot of their resources. So, yeah, that I would say is a larger scope. So it's not only about enterprise, but about many other things.
What I also found interesting is that the foundation has been promoting as well as documenting indigenous culture and knowledge. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think the roots of this organization lie in indigenous culture and knowledge somehow, because like I mentioned, honey hunting and the relation of the Adivasi people to the forest has been the basis of our work. And they have a lot of traditions related to that, when they will harvest, what is the social organization, who will be, harvesting where, like those domains of harvest, and many aspects related to the forest, which could be medicinal knowledge, or it could be knowledge related to animals or other plants and so on. So I think basing our work on traditional knowledge and starting off with forest gathering as one of the main aspects has been really useful. And even now we promote a lot of that. So even the indigenous seeds and the local varieties of millets, things like that, that continue to being supported by the foundation. And more than that, now with the rights work, I think it's a lot about domain, land and histories, language, culture, all those aspects which have become very crucial at this time. So one thing to mention is that, these communities have very small populations. So we are working with some communities who are just below 300. That's really low. And of course, then the higher ones go up to 10,000 or something like that. But still, that is very small. So cultures are endangered and language is endangered. So a lot needs to be done there. So we do work a lot on that. And now the way we have been doing this is to, get a lot of youth involved, their own community youth involved in this, who are educated, so that they can document a lot of their stories, their own traditional, knowledge from the point of view of elders, and what they would like to learn as youngsters from their elders. So I think that's the approach we have taken through fellowships, through promoting community foundations. That's how we are working.
So one wants to know about the indigenous cultures and knowledge of these tribal communities that live in the Nilgiris. What should one do? Should they contact the Keystone Foundation or you or any of the directors, or is this information now available anywhere in the public domain?
Some of it is, of course, available in the sense of research that other anthropologists and other scientists have done over here. But I would say from the community end and from the people, yes, you could contact Keystone, and we could try to put you in touch directly with the communities who can talk now about their own, culture and the way they want to preserve it. So be it related to bamboo, be it related to historic places, because we also have, Neolithic sites in Nilgiris which could relate to their culture. So they are also protecting those. So there's lots happening, and yes, do contact us. We'll see what we can do to put you in touch.
And even outside the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, are you working in other states?
Sure, yes. We have a lot of networks and NGO networks, I would say, across India. So my focus especially has been on on groups that work with Adivasi and forest issues, because maybe that's because the nature of our work is like that, and we wanted to build this common platform where we could share stories, where we could share best practices, where we can also lobby and advocacy together for various things, and also look at commonalities. So we could have communities exchanging different practices and learning from each other, which has been very useful. So the network is pretty, let's say, 20 years old now, and we've crisscrossed across the country: Jharkhand, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, even in southern Rajasthan and Maharashtra, very strong partners in Andhra Pradesh, in the Araku area. So we do work across the country through these partners, I would say.
With so much of experience now under your belt and the kind of work that you've done to preserve the environment, to help indigenous communities with various livelihood options and ensure a balance really between humans, planets, technology, ecosystem, all of that, if somebody wants to undertake the journey that you had undertaken decades back, what would you advise?
Gosh, that's a tough one. But I would say, I would say that's really your inner, inspiration and something that you want to work with. But I would say follow your dream, and that would be really the correct thing. Because I think if we didn't, pursue what we were doing and we left it, or we made a shortcuts or something, that wouldn't have worked out. So knowledge related to the topics that you want to work on, and how to negotiate it with communities and governments and other stakeholders, that's also very important to know. And chase your dream. That's it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nath. All power to you. May you continue to bring about the meaningful impact that you already are. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was really nice chatting.